Gotti, what is your understanding of the issue with Lebanon? Who's being honest? Who's being sincere? Who's being deceptive?
There was an agreement reached in principle before it became publicly announced between the United States and Iran, brokered by Pakistan, where that the ceasefire included Lebanon. Everybody understood that to be the case. It was understood by President Trump when he called Benjamin Netanyahu, but the Israelis informed the president that this would create a political problem for them because, Hezbollah got involved in the conflict 5 days after the conflict began. So, and the Israelis are treating the conflict with Hezbollah as a completely separate conflict, an ongoing conflict. Israel mobilized troops. They have a separate Lebanon policy. Right now they're trying to implement to advance deep into southern Lebanon, then to annex the totality of that territory into Israel. This is part of their, national security strategy, so to speak. And so to suddenly have Lebanon linked to the, comprehensive peace agreement that the United States is seeking with Iran, that was disconcerting, politically impossible for the Israelis to accept up front. And so political games had to be played. Netanyahu rejected that. Trump then, the U.S. pretended that Trump had thrown away these 10 points, and Vance had to go out and say this was a mistake on the part of the Iranians. And this could have been done under the misguided belief that Iran would say, "Oh gosh, you're right. We don't." We don't insist on this, but the Iranians, stood their ground and says the Pakistanis came out very strongly, condemning the Pakistani Minister of Defense, condemned the Israelis in very harsh language. The Pakistani president called the United States liars and said without any shadow of doubt that this was an agreement. And ultimately, the United States my understanding is that Israel has, in fact, acknowledged that the ceasefire will extend to Lebanon because that is the only political dynamic that can exist. This is going to require Israel to, have to,
grow,
eat things it doesn't want to eat. But they have no choice in this matter. Israel started this war. Israel is the one that on February 11th briefed the president on the ease in which this war could be won through regime change, suppression of missiles. The head of Mossad was there, giving the president intelligence briefings that were different from what he was getting from his own American advisors. The president went with the Israeli information. And so Netanyahu doesn't have too many cards that he's holding with his president right now. He's been embarrassed, disgraced, and the president had to buy him some political room. And that's what happened. There had to be a time for the Israelis to adjust to this new reality. But now, at the insistence of the United States, Israel acknowledges that this ceasefire extends to Lebanon.
Here's Larry. Here's the vice president doing his lying best. Chris, number 22.
I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. That said, the Israelis, as I understand it, again, I'm supposed to get a fuller report when I get on the plane, have actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. That's not because that is part of the ceasefire. I think that's the Israelis trying to set us up for success, and we'll, of course, see how that unfolds in the next few days. But look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
That is profoundly untrue, the last part of that statement, isn't it, Larry?
Yeah, but, hey, this has become the hallmark of the Trump administration. If you ain't lying, you ain't trying, okay? So, look, the United States has been desperately seeking a ceasefire since mid-March because of the economic fallout. Now, there are some around, there is a clearly established pattern of corruption within the Trump administration. You know, he comes out on a Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, like he did this week. So it's always in the first of the week where he either said, we're going to destroy them. And then like an hour and a half before the markets open, he'll say, oh, we've got a great opportunity for peace. It's going to be settled. Man, the price of oil starts falling. The stock market starts soaring. They've done that 3 times, 4 times so far. And they just did it Tuesday. And what they're saying is not true. These people on Wall Street are idiots that they buy into this nonsense. Look, Iran was not the one seeking for a ceasefire. Iran's quite content. Yeah, they've gotten hit. They've suffered. You know, the Israelis blew up a railroad, a Chinese-built railroad 4 or 5 days ago, and guess what? Iran finished rebuilding it today. So they're not wasting any time. You blow it up, we're going to rebuild it. So this is Iran's ready to continue to have the global economy in a chokehold. And anybody that's watched any kind of mixed martial arts knows that a chokehold can kill you. It can cut off the flow of blood to the brain, and what it is cut off the flow of oil. But some interesting things are going on behind the scenes now. Japan is sending a bunch of tankers. Apparently, they've cut a deal with Iran. They're going to get to sell a bunch of tankers into the Persian Gulf, load up on some Iranian oil, and sell back. And despite the United States said, but wait, you're our ally. And it's now every man or every country for themselves.